Well, as Harold mentioned, we've come today to the end of our study of the book of Proverbs, and what we find here, serving as sort of an exclamation point on the end of this whole book of godly wisdom, is an outline of a person who exemplifies all these principles of wisdom that we've been looking at. She's called the excellent or capable or virtuous wife, or the wife of noble character, depending on what translation you're using. And now there's two pitfalls I want to try and avoid as we approach a passage like this. The first pitfall is to think that it speaks only to women. Ellie and I did not pick this date for Eden's dedication because this sermon was the one that mostly Eden needs to hear. And I didn't pick it for the benefit of, just the ladies here in the congregation. Though, by the way, this will probably live forever on YouTube, right? And so we have the option of playing it every night for Eden as she falls asleep, which I think is a fantastic idea. It's not going to breed any resentment, right? This is not a passage that's just for women. Rather, I would argue that just like how those of us who've had godly mothers have much to emulate in their example, regardless of our sex or our marital status, so also the excellent wife of Proverbs 31 reminds us of the character qualities that the whole book of Proverbs has been urging all of us to employ, to value, and to follow after. We'd be fools not to pay attention so we can follow her example. In other words, husbands, Proverbs 31 is not in the Bible to give you some ammunition for the next time that your wife points out some of your shortcomings. You can say, well, look at you, you're not measuring up to this. That's not why it's in there. It's for us to look at ourselves and say, okay, what am I doing to live these things out? And that leads to the second pitfall, which is to treat these verses as a sort of checklist that if I haven't accomplished every item on this list, I'm living in sin. I'm a failure. No, first of all, the grammar in these verses and the context of the whole book indicates that this passage actually wasn't primarily written to women to begin with. This was not a checklist written to women to say, here's what you need to, here's the things that you need to accomplish. The whole book of Proverbs, and we see this especially in the first few chapters, as it keeps saying over and over again, my son, listen to my teaching. My son, don't forget my teaching. Don't forsake your father's teaching or the teaching of your mother. The book of Proverbs, as best we can tell, is written by Solomon or others like him. We don't really know who King Lemuel was or some of these other ones that are mentioned later in Proverbs. But all that to say, it's written to sons, royal part of the royal court. These boys that are going to grow up to be rulers someday, and it's trying to give them instruction on how they are supposed to live. And so this part here is outlining qualities that these sons should look for when evaluating potential spouses. The second reason I can't see this as a simple checklist for wives, or really anybody else, is that it is an acrostic poem. We can't see this in the English translation, but if we were reading the original Hebrew, we'd see that each verse begins with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So the first one begins with Aleph, and the next one is Bet. It's really the ABCs, those children's books that's like, A is alligator, the alligator swimming in the pond. B is for bear. The bear is, eating an apple, whatever. That's kind of what's going on here. It's each letter of the alphabet. And so we know that this is not, the author is not just sitting down and thinking, okay, what are all the qualities that a godly woman should have? And let me write down this exhaustive list or checklist. It is a poetic depiction of the ideal kind of wife, the kind of wife that is living out all the principles of wisdom that the rest of the book of Proverbs talks about. In fact, some pastors and authors have even asserted that this passage is just describing lady wisdom that we were introduced to back in chapters 8 and 9. I wouldn't personally go quite that far. But I think that the ideal wife of Proverbs 31 is meant to motivate us all to diligently bless others in the fear of the Lord. That's what I think this is, the thrust of this passage is going. And of course, as I already mentioned, it is meant to help the young men. In the original context, it's meant to help these young men in thinking about what kind of person should I be pursuing? If I'm looking to get married, what kind of person should I be pursuing? Not that she has to meet every single criteria, but that she has to be this kind of person, the kind of person who does these sorts of things, that lives out godly wisdom. I want us to look at three main qualities of the ideal wife listed here, which should motivate us to emulate her and to seek out a spouse like her if you're seeking for a spouse. Now, the first quality we see here, I should probably turn this clicker on, shouldn't I? So that I can put things up on the screen that I wanted to put up there. The first quality we see here about this lady is that she is incredibly valuable. Look at verses 10 through 12. Verse 10 says, "An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels." See that? I didn't need the clicker after all. It's just going to disappear. Whatever. We'll make do without it if we have to. Somehow God's word got preached for centuries without slides up on the screen, right? We might be okay. We might be okay. So the first thing we see about this lady is her rarity in verse 10. It says there, an excellent wife who can find. Now first, that word excellent conveys the concept of capability or even virtue or strength or valor. If you do a Hebrew word study on this word, the way it's most often translated in the English is armies. We talk about the armies of this. It's talking about valor and strength and virtue, capability. And that's why different English translations try to find different ways of conveying this idea, calling her the virtuous wife or the excellent or the capable wife or the wife of noble character. And then when he says, who can find? Goodness gracious. I really need to stop using the technology, apparently. The Lord is trying to tell me something. When it says there, who can find, that's not a statement of impossibility. That you cannot find a good wife out there. Actually, look at verse 29, where this woman is being praised. It says, many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. That word excellently is the same word used here in the beginning, where it says an excellent wife who can find. So which one is it? Is it that no one can find her, or is it that many women have done excellently? Well, what it's getting at here in this first verse, it's talking about, it's a statement of her rarity and her value. It's kind of like saying an excellent wife is a rare find. Not impossible. There are excellent wives out there. And verse 30 kind of points out verse 29 points out how this woman being depicted here surpasses all of them. All right, so that should help us to understand that, again, we're not talking about a checklist of things here. This is sort of giving us the superwoman ideal and giving all sorts of different kinds of qualities that you might find in a godly woman. And the second half of verse 10 says what? She is far more precious than jewels. She is more valuable than anything else. Why? Why would a parent tell her son this? That an excellent wife is far more precious than jewels? Well, we've talked about this already weeks ago when we were talking about godly wisdom in relationships and things. No one will have a greater impact on your life than your spouse, right? No one can be so close to you to do such great good in your life or to do such great harm if they're a wicked person. And so, this opening verse praises the excellent wife and says she is more important than anything else. She's rare, but she has a positive impact. Why is she valuable? Because she's rare, but also because she has a positive impact. Look at verse 11 and 12. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. So her husband can trust her completely. His heart trusts in her. Why? Because he knows that she's always going to do good, not evil, to him and to the household. Look at verse 12. She does him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She's the kind of person that you can relax around. You don't have to be on edge wondering what she's going to do or say to you or to somebody else. Perhaps you know somebody comes to mind when you think of somebody who's always feels like they need to apologize for their significant other. They're just kind of walking on eggshells around them. The husband of this lady never needs to do that. He never needs to apologize for her. She is a wonderful influence on him and on other people around. And there's a stability and even a luxury that she brings to the household. Look at verses 21 and 22. Skip ahead a bit here, where it says she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. What is that getting at? Well, fine linen, purple, like the purple color, we think nothing of it today. It can be just your favorite color, right? But people in that day, in that culture, like purple is this exotic dye that comes from somewhere far away, and not everybody has it. That's why it came to be associated with royalty, because only kings could afford to have that kind of dye shipped in. And so what is this saying about this lady? She adds so much to the household. She's decorating the household with bed coverings, with fine linen and purple. And then look at verse 23. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Why are we talking about him all of a sudden? Because the kind of person that she is, she brings honor to him, and so he's known in the gates. The gate was an important place in the city. This is where people did business and, where decisions were made, where the judges of the land sat, to judge cases. It's a courthouse, it's everything. The husband is known there. Why? Because he's got a good reputation. His family has a good reputation. She has done good to him by her godliness and her wisdom and the way that she lives. It says earlier, I think I skipped over verse 21, she is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. And everybody knows that when you wear red, you stay warm in the winter, right? What's significant about this when it says all her household are clothed in scarlet? Well, there again, scarlet, not the easiest thing to come by. It's talking about luxurious. Like another way to put it would be, her household has the best kind of clothing. They've got the best, and so they don't have to be afraid when the cold weather comes. She has a positive impact, especially on those closest to her. And do you see why, as I mentioned before, a loving parent might write an acrostic poem like this to instruct their sons on what kind of a person to look for. They say your spouse is going to have a huge impact on your life, so you better pick one that is going to do good to you and not harm. She can have a really positive impact on you. Verse 25 talks about this ideal woman having strength and dignity as her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. Again, she doesn't have to fear the future, because she's prepared, because she's been working hard, and she's got strength and dignity as her clothing. So we should be thinking about this both personally, but also thinking about this if you're in a position where you are not married and you want to be, and you're thinking about what kind of a person do I want to spend the rest of my life with. Ask yourself this question. When I'm getting to know somebody, do I see a positive impact from them and the people around them? Or just think about it personally. What impact do I have? What impact do we have on the people around us, particularly on the people to whom we are the closest? If you're brave enough, go home and ask your spouse or ask someone else close to you, what kind of an impact am I having in our household, in our relationship, in your life? Are we having this valuable impact like this lady? This section begins by pointing out just how valuable this kind of excellent wife is, particularly to her husband and household, because of all the good that she does them. And that theme is picked up. We talked about verses 23, 25, some of these other verses. But the majority of this passage outlines more specifically the kinds of things that this noble wife does that make her such a valuable and positive impact on those closest to her. And I want to summarize those things under the heading that she is industrious. So not only is she valuable, but she's industrious. She shows her industry in a couple different ways. First of all, she shows diligent industry within the home. Look at verses 13 through 15. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. What's going on here? Sort of two things. She provides clothing and then she provides food. The clothing is mentioned there in verse 13, talking about seeking wool and flax. The flax is what's used to make linen, and so it's kind of describing getting the fabric or whatever necessary to make warmer clothing as well as lighter clothing for the cold weather or for the warm weather. And the key word I want us to notice there is willing hands. She works with willing hands. Nobody has to drag her off the couch to provide for her family. She's taking the initiative. Look at verse 15. It says she rises while it's still night to provide food for her household. Like she's getting up before the dawn. And certainly in an age before microwaves and ovens and things like that, it could take a long time to prepare a luscious meal. My favorite kind of meal is leftovers. I can just pop it in the microwave and be done in like 30 seconds. And even then I'm impatient. But this lady is like, I'm going to get up, I'm providing food. And what kind of food? Verse 14 says she's like the ships of the merchant, bringing her food from afar. Again, picture this. You're living in a village over in the Middle East. What access do you have to food? You've got, whatever food you raise on your own farm, and maybe you can buy some food at the market or whatever. This lady's going above and beyond, bringing in, like a merchant ship, bringing in all kinds of foods from around the world. We can take it for granted that I can go down the street and get chicken shawarma from Greece. In one place I can get, Thai food or whatever. The food of the world has come to us. And we have so much opportunity. But look at the diligence that this ideal wife is showing, she's bringing in her food from afar and then rising early to provide food for her household. When it says there are portions for her maidens would have been like servant girls. And I don't think this means that she's making breakfast for the servants, but it is conveying the concept that she cares just as much about the servants as the rest of the household. That she's making sure they have what they need too. She cares for each one, not just certain ones that seem important. Verse 19 continues this theme. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. These are tools that were used to make string, yarn, these sorts of things. And then verse 27 is sort of a summary statement of all this. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. This is the thrust of most of this passage, that she is industrious, she is diligent, and she's looking well to the ways of her house. Eating the bread of idleness is just kind of another term for being lazy. And we can see as we look through the rest of Proverbs the danger of slothfulness, laziness. We've talked about that earlier in this series. So she's diligent in her industry within the home, but the passage also alludes to diligent industry outside of the home as well. Look at verses 16 to 18. She considers a field and buys it, With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. This is describing stuff that would have been considered more masculine traits back in that day, and maybe even still today. Going out, buying land, engaging in business, even outside the home. She's planting this vineyard. Look at verse 17. She dresses herself, literally, she girds up her loins with strength and makes her arms strong. That's not just talking about like moral strength. It's talking about like she's able to work hard. She can do some hard labor. She's not just, the wilting wallflower. She's actually willing to roll up her sleeves and get to work. And verse 18 talks about how she has success in her business. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable, and so what does she do? She works late into the night. Her lamp does not go out at night. Her lamp does not go out at night. Now, I want us to notice something here. Like I was saying before about this being, an idealized picture and not necessarily a checklist. What does verse 15 say? She rises while it is yet night, so she's up before the sun. What does verse 18 say? Her lamp does not go out at night, so she doesn't go to bed early either. In fact, if you take that literally, it means she's up all night long. What's it saying? She never sleeps. So if you're getting a couple of hours rest each night, you're living in sin. If that's how we're supposed to take this, right? Some people are morning people. They're up before the sun. Some people are night owls. Their lamp takes a long time to go out at night because they're up working on stuff. You can be industrious either way, but don't take this as a reference to the fact that, God hates sleep or he expects wives to just do everything and never get any rest. But again, she's diligent in her industry, both inside and outside the home. Look at verse 24 as well. She makes linen garments and sells them. She's got a business. In today's world, she'd probably have TikTok and Instagram and all this and be like, let me show you how I made these linen garments and I'm going to, do all this. Because that's what we do now, right? To have a side job, we can make some money if we can get enough followers on social media. But this is what she's doing. She's selling her garments as well. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So she's diligent, whether working inside or outside the home. Her diligence doesn't just stretch to things that profit herself or her family. Her diligence goes into the realm of generosity as well. Verse 20 speaks to this. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. And here again, we were reminded of the righteous person of Proverbs 28:27. It says, whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse. Right? The Proverbs again and again promote this concept of generosity, caring for the rights and the needs of those who are less fortunate than us, those who do not have as much as we have. And this lady exemplifies that. She's opening her hands to the poor. Look at the second half of verse 20. Reaches out her hands to the needy. This isn't she begrudgingly gives the needy a few bucks when they come banging on her door. No, she's initiating. She's reaching out. She's the one taking the initiative to give to those who have need. She sees a need and she seeks to give. She's generous and she's diligent in her generosity. She's also diligent in teaching and passing on godly wisdom. We see this in verse 26. She opens her mouth with wisdom. The teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Now we know from elsewhere in the Old Testament, it talks about fathers having responsibility to instruct their children, but also mothers having a responsibility to instruct their children. And here, this ideal wife is doing it. She's doing her part. She's instructing. Most likely, children would be the what the immediate context would call for, but it doesn't explicitly say just children, right? It just says she opens her mouth with wisdom. The teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She's able to convey God's wisdom to others. Certainly her kids, but perhaps others as well. And so as we think about all the different things that this woman, this idealized woman does, and if there were more than 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, there would probably be even more things mentioned, right? Because you have to fill out the acrostic poem. But as we think about these kinds of things, we think about what kind of strengths, what kind of gifts has God given to each of us? And are we being diligent to exercise those gifts, to do what God has given us to do within our God-given spheres of responsibility and authority? God has put each of us in different seasons of life, in different places in our families, in our communities, and we have different responsibilities to do. Are we being diligent? Are we being industrious in the things that God has given us to do, like this passage exemplifies for us? The ideal wife's quality of diligent industry gives her the quality of being very valuable, like we saw in the first quality. But it also gives her a third quality, and that's where the chapter and really the book ends, reminding us that this kind of a person is praiseworthy. Verses 28 it gives us what the husband says. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. This kind of a woman surpasses all by her family. And remember, this is written before Mother's Day was a thing. Right? So this is not some we have to get a card because that day has come around again. This is like her family is seeing the immense value that she brings to their lives, and they're like, oh my goodness, bless you. Maybe there's someone you need to rise up and call blessed. Maybe we need to be like the children and the husband of verse 28 and recognize the wonderful benefit that we've received from a valuable lady in our life like this, or perhaps a man as well. And let me just say this while I'm on this verse. If you aren't getting praised, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a failure. We live in a broken world with broken people who do not always recognize a good thing when they see it. They don't always recognize the good that is done to them, and so praise is sometimes in short supply. Psalm 109 talks about this. David writes this. He says, "Be not silent, O God of my praise, for wicked and deceitful mouths are opened against me, speaking against me with lying tongues. They encircle me with words of hate and attack me without cause. In return for my love, they accuse me. But I give myself to prayer." Literally, you could translate it, I am prayer. What does David do when he's showing love to others, but getting accusations and bitterness and anger back instead? What does he do? He goes to the Lord. He becomes prayer personified. He lives in prayer. He says, "They reward me evil for good and hatred for my love." And so he goes to the Lord and he cries out to God because he knows that God sees truly all the loving acts that are ignored by others. God knows the sacrifices that you make, even when those closest to you will not acknowledge them. So be encouraged. Take those griefs to the Lord. It's okay to grieve, to recognize that I'm having hatred returned for my love. Take it to the Lord. And look forward, if nothing else, look forward to that day when you will hear from him, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's the most important praise of all to receive. So this lady is praiseworthy, and she's receiving that praise, first of all, from her family. And then the last two verses kind of talk more generally about inner and outer aspects of praiseworthiness. What is it that makes her so praiseworthy? Well, the first thing it mentions in verse 30 is that she fears the Lord. It says, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And fear of the Lord is where the whole discussion of wisdom started back in chapter 1. Chapter 1, how does it open up? It's saying, like, this is what the Proverbs are for, to help you learn wisdom and all this. And then the opening line is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is where you got to start. The wisdom of Proverbs, I've said it before, the wisdom of Proverbs is not a bunch of tips and tricks for, like, living a better life. If you try to live these things out without a right relationship with God, you're going to fail, you're going to burn yourself out. We need to be in awe of God and live in the right, submissive, obedient kind of awe-filled relationship with Him that we were designed to live. We need that fear of the Lord if we're going to actually gain and live out this wisdom. And this ideal woman here has done that. She's a woman who fears the Lord, and so she is praiseworthy. She is worthy to be praised. And because she fears the Lord, because she has that right relationship with Him, she lives out God's wisdom, and she has many good works that make her praiseworthy as well. We praise others for their character. We should praise others for their character, but we can also and should also praise them for their works. When someone does something praiseworthy, we ought to recognize it and honor it. So this quintessential wise woman is super valuable. She's super industrious, and because of it, she's praiseworthy. How should these qualities impact us? What do we do with this? Well, as I've mentioned already, the first and most obvious from the context application to take away is that we should look for this kind of a person if we're looking for someone to marry. That we should be looking for someone who lives out godly wisdom. Remember that the sons that the Proverbs are written to, they were urged back in especially chapters 8 and 9 to value and cherish wisdom itself, which was personified as Lady Wisdom. You know, she built her house and hewed out her 7 pillars, and she calls, if anyone's simple, come turn in here and I will teach you wisdom, you know. So they personified Lady Wisdom and said, you should cherish this above everything else. And now it's saying you should cherish a wife who is also going in that same direction. You should seek out someone who is pursuing Lady Wisdom as well, who's kind of Lady Wisdom in the flesh. You should be seeking that kind of a person. By the way, singleness is commended in Scripture as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So this proverb is not commanding that everybody is required to get married. If you're content in your singleness, serve God in your singleness. That's a wonderful thing to do. But if you are looking for a spouse, godly character needs to be the first priority, not their charm or their beauty. Like verse 30 says, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain. You want someone who's praiseworthy? Look for someone who fears the Lord. Not to say that physical beauty and attraction should play no part in it. But what is first in your priority list? And then second, as I've been saying, we should seek to be this kind of person, right? We should seek to be the kind of person who works hard to bless others out of the fear of the Lord, not just seeking our own good. The underlying qualities of this excellent wife are presented all throughout Proverbs. Ask yourself the question, am I the kind of person who those closest to me can fully trust? They don't have to be afraid to be associated with me because I'm doing them good and not harm all the days of my life, like this lady does. Is my life characterized by diligence to whatever roles God has given me? Or is my life more characterized by eating the bread of idleness? Do I exercise generosity toward others, passing along my resources and my wisdom? Am I willing to open my mouth and speak God's truth into the lives of others who need to hear it? That's what this lady exemplifies for us too. Think about your reputation. What is my reputation in my workplace, in my neighborhood, in my family, in my community? What does that say about the kind of person that I am? And most importantly of all, do I truly live in awe and respect of God, in the fear of the Lord? Because that has to be the foundation of all of it. How am I doing in drawing close to Him, living in obedience to Him? Not just when I like what He tells me to do in His Word, but especially when God's instructions are at odds with what my heart wants to do. Am I submitting to Him in reverence and fear of God? May God enable each of us to walk in the proper fear of Him so that we can diligently live out His wisdom and be used by Him to have an incredibly positive impact on the people around us. That's what God can do through us as we walk with Him in the fear of the Lord. Let's go to Him in prayer. Father, we look to You because we recognize that we are inadequate to live these things out. We need the empowering work of Your Spirit. And I thank You for the fact that You give it. You give it freely to us. By faith in Jesus Christ, You seek for us to be filled with Your Spirit. And I pray that You would do it, that You'd make us submissive to You, that we walk in right relationship with You, and that You would use us to bring great blessing to those around us, just like this quintessential wise woman of Proverbs 31 so richly blesses her family and her community. Thank You, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen.